Recently, I've been playing a lot of this game called Overcooked. It's this game where you play as a chef and you go through this increasingly difficult and crazy series of kitchens, basically trying to fill orders for customers. And of course, in the beginning, it's easy to do. The orders are pretty simple and there aren't too many of them coming your way. But as time goes on, more and more orders start showing up. There's lots of little things thrown into the kitchens to make your work harder and the orders get more complicated. And if you get behind on just one order, then everything starts to pile up and you have basically no hope of clawing your way back from the brink. And if you are a student, this is probably sounding pretty familiar right now because it is a good representation of what basically every semester has looked like up until this point. And that leads to the obvious question. How do you not fall behind? How do you become one of those people who can stay on top of things consistently over the long term, even as the semester wages a war of attrition against both your organizational systems and your motivation? Well, in the case of Overcooked, the answer is pretty simple. Get good. But in terms of your school performance, it really breaks down to doing three things consistently. First, you need a well-organized task management system and calendar, and you need to keep them well-organized over the entire semester. Secondly, you need to take your assignments and projects, even the things you need to study for exams, and break them down into mini tasks that can be given milestone deadlines, which are easy to achieve. And finally, you need to put in work frequently so you don't get rusty. Basically, work every single day, at least some small amount. So in this video, I want to help you guys put these three things into action in your own lives. I'm going to dig into each of these, give you some specific tips, and show you how I've implemented them into my own life so you have some context. The first step to staying on top of things throughout the entire semester is to make sure that your task management system, which is your to-do list and your calendar, is a perfect representation of everything you need to do. That way, your brain doesn't have to worry about those things. It knows that it's an external system that it can trust. And building that system really starts at the beginning of the semester. When you go to each of your classes and you get the syllabus for that class, take some time to transfer what's on the syllabus into your task management system. For example, here's the syllabus for one of my marketing classes from my sophomore year. And on it, there's a couple of written assignments listed with due dates, and there's also some quiz dates. So over in Todoist, which is my recommendation for a to-do list app for most students, I have written all of these assignments down. So that way they are in the system that I'm going to be looking at every single day. Now that takes care of the initial setup at the beginning of the semester, but that's just the start. As the semester goes on, you need to be adding anything that your professor assigns you or anything that comes up into that to-do list. And there are really two different ways to do this. The first method is the most straightforward one, and it's the one that I like to use. It's to simply add new tasks into that to-do list or into your calendar app the moment you hear about them. So if you're sitting in class and your professor assigns you a math assignment, you open Todoist, you put in the details, you put in the due date, and you're good to go. There is a perfectly valid alternative to doing this though, because sometimes you have to rush out of class and you just don't have time to enter all the details and push that due date button and do all of that little fiddling around while you're in class. So the alternative is to use what I like to call a daily note. This is just a scrap of paper in your pocket, or maybe one of those tiny little moleskin notebooks like my friend Martin has, or maybe just a note in your favorite note-taking app where you write all of the assignments and everything that comes up during the day in plain English. You're not messing with due dates or priority levels or whatever your task management system has you do. Using a daily note is an easy and simple way of writing down all the things you need to do for an assignment without having to fiddle with an app, but it is not a task management system. It's not organized. You can't prioritize it. You can't look at what's coming up in the next 7 days. So if you're going to do this, you need to establish a daily habit where you go through your daily note and you transfer whatever's on it into your more trusted, robust system. Finally, you need a way to keep your calendar and especially your to-do list from getting disorganized and chaotic. And you're probably familiar with this happening. Every semester, all these tasks pile up and some of them just slip through the cracks, or you forget to check them off, or the details change, and then you look at your to-do list one day and it is a mess. But if you establish a review day, like Sunday afternoons, to go through your task management system and clean these things up, this isn't going to happen. And I'm actually going to do this right now. So the to-do list app that I use these days is called Asana, and it is great for working with teams, which I do, so that's why I use it over Todoist. But as you can see, my personal task list here has some red due dates on it. Now, some of these tasks are things that I actually did do but just forgot to check off, so I'm gonna go ahead and check those off, and some of them I didn't do, so I need to figure out what to do with those particular tasks. The second main thing you want to be doing on a consistent basis is breaking your work down into manageable chunks and then setting deadlines for those chunks so that way you're working consistently over the long term rather than pushing everything off until the last second. And you should do this for your assignments and your projects, but also for the topics you need to study. If you have a test coming up and you know what you want to study, you should break down that studying into several different chunks so that way you're doing it over the long term. Doing this is going to help you deal with Parkinson's law, which states that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. And I'm sure you're just as familiar with this as I am. You get assigned a project, you have 3 weeks to do it, but in your head, it exists as one task, and of course you wait until 2 days before the deadline to even start it. However, when you break that project down into mini tasks, each with their own individual deadline, now you have a well-defined plan and you know you're going to be doing things consistently across that whole 3 weeks. So here's an example of this in action. When I was a sophomore, I had an assignment in one of my English classes to create a personal website, which is a pretty big project. So I broke it down into individual little milestones, create a list of pages, make a wireframe mock-up on notebook paper, start coding things, and each of those had their own individual deadline, which helped me make consistent progress on the project without a whole ton of stress. One other huge benefit to setting these milestones is that it decreases the initial resistance to starting a task, because this is what makes us procrastinate. It's the resistance to starting something that seems really big and scary. But when you've broken your project down, that little mini milestone doesn't seem like it's going to take that long, and so you can jump into the work right away. And speaking of right away, for most projects, you should make that first milestone due date be the exact same day as when you get the assignment. Doing this will push you to put just a little bit of work into the project while everything is still fresh in your mind. And it doesn't have to be big, it can be a very tiny amount of work. For example, if you've just been assigned an essay, you can just spend 5 minutes brain dumping what you know or writing down questions. On the other hand, if you wait a few days to start the project, now you have to spend a bunch of time refamiliarizing yourself with the requirements and getting everything reloaded into your brain, and that is valuable time that you could be using to play Zelda instead. Lastly, do some amount of work every single day, or at least almost every single day, because frequency is your friend. The novelist Anthony Trollope once said, "A small daily task, if it be really daily, will beat the labors of a spasmodic Hercules." This is something that I learned really well in the process of writing a book. Ever since 2012, I had wanted to write one, but I had failed every single time I'd try because I would try to write entire chapters all at once. Or one time I actually flew down to Texas to go to a conference where I tried to write the entire thing in one weekend, and I completely failed. So a couple of years later, I tried a different tactic. I set a goal at my Habitica to write just 500 words a day. And it didn't matter what those 500 words were. They could have been, "I hate writing," over and over and over again. They could be horrible, horrible words, but I had to put them in, no matter what. And after just a few months of putting in this daily effort, I ended up writing an entire book. In fact, this book that I wrote is about twice as long as what I originally intended, because every single day I was getting myself into the mode of writing, and I would end up having more ideas and coming up with more anecdotes than I initially expected. The other huge benefit that frequency brings is that it prevents you from going into slumps, where you get rusty and you're not used to doing the work anymore. And I have a lot of experience with this as well. I've had times where I do a lot of different podcasts in like a big batch, and then it'll take weeks before I do it again, and I feel really rusty. Here's how Cal Newport puts it in his book, How to Win at College. Student slumps occur when you take a long break from work and then find yourself unable to easily pull yourself back into a working rhythm. In order to deny the opportunity for this to occur, you should do some amount of schoolwork every single day. Now, if you're having trouble establishing this daily work habit, one thing you can do that will help is to start removing choices from the equation. And by that, I mean pre-planning elements of your study sessions, both in terms of location and time. It can be very helpful to establish a specific study spot that you go to every single day and to have a specific block of time when you know you're going to be studying. Now, if you have a specific block of time every single day, that's very good to have. But if your calendar is such that you've got student organizations or night classes that make every day different, at least at the beginning of every week, pre-plan when you're gonna have blocks of study time, so that way you know on a given day when you're gonna be putting in that daily amount of work. Now, I know we have covered a lot in this video, but remember, it all boils down to building 3 consistent habits that you keep throughout the entire semester. Number 1, making sure your task management system, both your calendar and your to-do list, are well maintained on a weekly basis. Number 2, breaking your assignments and projects down into manageable chunks and then setting deadline dates so you're working consistently. And number 3, building the habit of working every single day so you don't get rusty. Of course, even if these habits do help you stay on top of your schoolwork this semester, there are gonna be things that you just always seem to be falling behind upon. And for me, one of those things is my reading list. And that's why I'm really excited to tell you guys about Blinkist, which is this week's video sponsor. Blinkist is a digital learning app that basically distills all the key lessons and most important insights from tons of different nonfiction books into these little tiny packs that you can read or listen to in just about 15 minutes. And personally, I'm a huge fan of Blinkist Blinkist because as somebody who's interested in a ton of different topics, my to be read list over on Goodreads is about a mile long. Now, with some books, I know right from the start that I want to read the entire thing cover to cover. Michael Lewis's The Big Short is a great example here since I watched the movie, absolutely fell in love with it, and then knew I had to read the entire book. But with some other books, I don't always know if I want to read the whole thing, or maybe I just want to get the key insights from it without digging into all the padding. And that's where using Blinkist can be really helpful because you have a limited amount of time and Blinkist can actually help you vet books before you decide to buy them and invest a ton of time into them. Plus, once you've read the summary of all the key points, now you've primed your brain to be more receptive to those points if you decide to read the entire book, and hence they're going to be more embedded in your memory. And of course, if you've already read a book and you just want to refamiliarize yourself with those concepts, going through the Blink is a very time-effective way to do it. Normally, a subscription to Blinkist costs about $50 for an entire year, but if you use that link down in the description below or on screen right now, you can test drive the service yourself for free. And if you do decide to subscribe afterwards, that link will also get you at 20% off. Now, once you start using the app, it's going to start giving you personalized recommendations, but if you don't know where to start right now, you might like to check out a couple of links that I've gone through myself recently. A really good one is Dan Ariely's Predictably Irrational, which explains why our brains think irrationally and can actually help you make better decisions. And another one would be Benny Lewis's Fluent in 3 Months, which is all about how to learn new languages quickly. 3 Months, which is all about how to learn. For sponsoring this video and helping to support this channel, and thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and you found it useful, definitely give it a like and go down in the comments below if you have any tips that I didn't mention here. If you're not subscribed already, you can do so right there to get new videos every single week, and you can also click right there to get a free copy of my book on how to earn better grades. Or you can click right there to listen to our latest podcast episode, which answers 5 questions from you guys, including the question, how do I start networking and building relationships when I don't have any experience? And you can click right there to get one more video on this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.